one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, November 10th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 4 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Transit riders may not have to wait that much longer to get back on the LRT. The city says partial service could be up and running as soon as your Friday commute. Before that happens, though, there are other steps to ensure the trains will be safe. And here's City News reporter Prushka Gobolkista.
City Manager Steve Kanalakis said in a memo that before the 7 trains can run on the tracks, TRA, an independent company brought in to examine the system, has to give the city the go-ahead first. This company would need to validate the testing process before the city can officially confirm that the trains will be running by Friday. Although full service is expected by next month, many councillors still want an inquiry into the LRT, which will be voted on at this morning's City Council meeting. But at 9:15 this morning, Councillors Catherine McKenney and Carol Ann Meehan will be on City News to talk more about the inquiry. Pirushka Gopal-Kista, City News.
City News time 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Plenty of sunshine for the morning, and then clouds build for the afternoon and evening. The high today, 11 degrees, will drop to -2, though, for the low, cooler. And then tomorrow, Remembrance Day, sunshine to start, then mainly cloudy, a gusty wind, a high near 8. For today, the high, 11.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 4 degrees. A new COVID policy for Smiths Falls workers could be brought in as soon as Monday. That's the next council meeting, and a mandate COVID vaccine for all employees could be enacted then. Now, Committee of the Whole already voted 4-3 in favor of this policy. Workers who choose to stay unvaccinated in Smiths Falls who work for the town would face unpaid leave for a time to be determined. If adopted, the vaccine policy would take effect sometime in the new year. Now, the COVID-19 Science Advisory Table met to discuss the increase in COVID cases. Local epidemiologist Dr. Doug Manuel says there are things we can do to reverse a trend that are threefold.
Third doses in kids, continue to increase vaccinations to people who haven't been vaccinated. The challenge there is that for kids, we won't see an impact for that until January, even if we start vaccinating in the beginning of December.
Dr. Manuel says putting or reimposing restrictions is not out of the question at this point. You can listen to the full interview with the doctor coming up on the Rob Snow Show at 11:45. City News time 9:02. Following the regular council meeting, those who are around that table will choose someone to fill a current empty seat. Jenna Sudd's federal election win vacated the seat in Canada North. Now, 20 people did apply to take the position temporarily until the next municipal election next October. Now, some have already made it clear they want to run for the seat next year. Some will have a running start if they are appointed to the council seat now. Now, each person will be given a brief presentation time to council, and then every councillor can ask one question of every candidate. A residential school survivor says the search for unmarked graves in Brantford is a step toward healing. Six Nations of the Grand River has begun searching the grounds of the Mohawk Institute using ground-penetrating radar. John R. Elliott says he attended that residential school from 1947 to 1952. He says he ran away numerous times but was always forced back. He says it took so long to begin the search, but he's happy that ground search is now underway. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's got the news and the views.
He's got views on the news.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Busy, busy, busy. Another busy day in the news business. Just keeps coming. Yikes. The inflation rate just came out in the United States, and it's 6.2%. 6.2%, the annual inflation rate in the United States. My goodness. The experts were predicting a strong number, but not 6.2%. That was stronger than expected. Remember, the latest reading in Canada for the inflation rate, the annual inflation rate, was 4.4%. In the United States, 6.2%. but they do calculate inflation a little bit different down there. Car prices and used car prices, big difference. But that's going to move markets today. We'll have some coverage. Good morning and welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. We are flat out until noon today, my friends. There is a lot going on. I've been in the radio station since 6 o'clock this morning, and I haven't stopped. You are in the right place. We will have all the news, and we'll get your views on the news because, hey, that's kind of what we do around here. City Council will be in session shortly. And as always, a busy agenda. They are appointing a councillor today to replace a vacancy for the City Council, Canada North, after Jenna Sudds ran successfully for the Trudeau Liberals in the Canada riding, Canada Carleton. So this is the course of action that the council decided on. An appointment over holding a by-election. I thought that was the right choice to make, given we're less than a year out from the citywide election anyway. So the whole thing is going to be settled today, and the person will be sworn in today and be a city councillor. But the fireworks are going to be all over light rail. And the vote that might come up today depending if the mayor has anything up his sleeve again. There could be a vote this time around to have a judicial inquiry into the light rail mess. At least there could be a debate, maybe even a vote. I don't think the vote has the votes. If it comes up for a vote, it's not going to pass, but it will be nice to get everyone on the record, I think, a year out from the election. This is day 52 without light rail service in the city. Although, as we learned yesterday, a bare bones light rail operation could be up and running as soon as Friday, if things get the go-ahead. Day 52. So it will have been 54 days, I guess, all told. 54 days without light rail. The city, I would remind you, paid for 17 trains. Right? There might be, could be, maybe, cross your fingers, 7 operating on Friday. Okay. Not exactly value for money there. But nevertheless, 7 trains, I guess, is better than 0 trains, and the buses will be there as a backup just in case. You know what I was thinking today? It's going to snow soon. You can feel it in the air. You could just feel it in the air. I hope we have a better winter with these trains because it's going to be snowing soon. Some places in northwestern Ontario are going to get 40 centimeters of snow today. Okay, you know it's headed this way. It's only a matter of time before that kind of weather comes this way. Do we have a system that's up to the job? So we're going to have extensive coverage of the city council meeting this morning. We have a pair of councillors coming up here shortly, Councillors McKinney and Meehan, and we'll get into all of these issues. In fact, my opening remarks will be abbreviated this morning because I want to have more time to spend with the councillors. And as always, our friends at Rogers Television will lead the Rob Snow Show at around 10 o'clock and broadcast your city council meeting in its entirety. And as well, this morning, our City Hall insider for the Rob Snow Show, Pat Aguccione, will join me from the Ottawa Community Voice newspapers, where he is managing editor, and give us kind of a play-by-play rundown of everything that's been happening. Also on the show, it's a Wednesday. That means it's time to score your political fix, and there is much to dissect when it comes to the intrigue on Parliament Hill. Aaron O'Toole met the media again yesterday. It did not go very well again because whatever Mr. O'Toole wants to talk about as the leader of the official opposition, it all gets lost because all the press gallery wants to ask Mr. O'Toole about is the problems in his own party. And 7 weeks of the Conservative Party mired in defending a dozen, maybe more MPs who are opposed to mandatory vaccinations. Civil Liberties Caucus, get into all of that. Shadow Cabinet announced yesterday some notable appointments, some notable non-appointments. We'll go through that. And no deal, apparently no deal between the New Democrats and the Liberals on some sort of agreement that would see the New Democrats support the Liberals for the next 3 years in some kind of official coalition capacity anyway. It's not happening. Mr. Singh says he's not interested. I think that's probably best for the NDP. But Andrew Coyne points out in his column in the Globe today that the NDP doesn't want an election. Okay, can't afford an election. They're not going to defeat the Liberals anyway. They're broke. And after all, what's the difference between a Liberal and a New Democrat these days anyway? Liberals can usually count on the NDP, and if not, they'll just go to the bloc. So maybe this has been much to do about nothing from the very beginning. What else do we have? Bruce McIntyre, Valley View. He's with the Eganville leader. And we have stock markets at record highs. We got Bitcoins on the run again. We have the inflation rate report out of the United States, 6.2%. Lots of questions about the future direction of interest rates, of course. We'll talk stocks, the markets, investing this morning with an expert from Horizons, ETFs, and the Talkback Hour. The Talkback Hour this morning is when dogs attack. Okay? Dogs and the people who own them. Pit bulls. Back in the news. And the Pitbull Ban in Ontario is back in the news. It's been a ban on pit bulls in Ontario since 2005, since Dalton McGuinty was the premier. But according to reports, the Ford government is getting ready to lift that ban. It has loosened some of the regulations already, inspired by the seizure of a pit bull-like dog that was released. And now we learn 4 days later, attacked a young child. Should the pit bull ban be lifted in Ontario? It's always been a controversial topic whenever I've brought it up with you here on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Well, we all loved our rock T-shirts growing up, right? It was our badge. Hey, we went to this concert. We knew that band inside out. So we kept doing that and kept promoting that. What's sort of happening now is that audience is dying. I always say the earth is flat. So the 60s rockers are falling off the end of the earth. So you don't see as big a sales anymore because my audience is disappearing. What's sort of helping to promote that history is the kids are buying vinyl. And luckily we have a vinyl shop in the neighborhood here, a record center. So what's happening is I've seen kids come in with their dad. And the dad say, hey, do you have any Beatles shirts? Do you have any CBGB? Do you have any of this? I said, well, why? He said, well, because my daughter's into it. She's wearing my T-shirt. So slowly it's coming back, right? The kids are, I think, getting fed up with the generic music that's out there. And they want to click into something that, first of all, links them to their parents, something that they thoroughly enjoy now, and maybe they're passing it on to their grandkids. Pandemic has been a couple of things, definitely hard on everybody. So much messaging that's out there that people don't understand, stats that every day, Jesus Murphy, like I'm getting a headache just reading this stuff, right? So really it was just trying to understand where we were going to go from there. The city of Ottawa all of a sudden said, everybody's got to wear a mask. You got to wear it on the bus. People were scrambling, okay? And I had, the store next door had really big windows, so I just flooded the window with masks. Well, that was the activity that saved the business. People were coming in buying 2, 3, 4 masks at a time at $20 a pop here. But my masks were so different. They were the Rolling Stones, Beatles, Queen, all the pop culture. Everything else out there was medical masks. And right, so people said, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to show my rock and roll. So it became the new T-shirt as far as I'm concerned. Well, what I've done, I'm Hindenburg. I'm now at 1114A Wellington Street, which is next door to the Fab Gear store. And the reason I've changed names, I've rebranded the store, is because I was planning on retiring. And in December, I go, oh, I'm not going to retire. But I've committed to changing what the store is about. So I came up with a new name, Fab Gear's Rock Shop, where legends are dressed. And essentially get that message out. I prefer if the shirt don't fit, you come in, you try another one on. People like to feel the fabrics with clothing. It's amazing. You'll come in and go, oh, I love that. Oh, can I try this? So that's the big difference. I'm not out to make a gazillion dollars. I stick the way I am, old school. I take cash, we take cards. Come on in and talk to the owner.
News 1011 FM
and 1310 AM.
Councillor Carol Ann Meehan joins me this morning. Good morning, Councillor.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. Councillor McKenney may be joining us shortly, I hope.
I hope so, too. Love talking with Catherine.
Why should there be a judicial inquiry into the light rail matter?
Because we have to get to the heart of what actually happened with the procurement of Stage 1. We need to find out about the players who pulled this deal together. And the only way to really do that, with having an arm's length from the city, is with a judicial inquiry. And quite frankly, Rob, the fact that we are pressing for this is already having a benefit, I think. We are starting to, shake a few coconuts from the tree, if you will. We see just how hard the mayor's office is pushing back, not wanting this judicial inquiry. That's telling. I think it's telling. I'm not suggesting anything, but I think that they're not really happy with this and what it might uncover. And I don't know if you've been privy to this email exchange between former Mayor Bob Chiarelli and Brian Guest, his former advisor, when it comes to the LRT. Mr. Chiarelli was asked, I guess, I don't know if it was on your show.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was.
Oh,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
there you're making news. He suggested that maybe the next council could, if we don't get it in this term of council, we could have a judicial inquiry called next term of council. And I think that suggestion shocked Brian Guest. Brian Guest, who is really well connected with the mayor's office,
Sure.
he was quite concerned about it, enough that he, called or wrote Bob Chiarelli and said, "What are you doing? This isn't good." And to me, that's very telling. I think we have to keep the pressure on for this judicial inquiry and see where it leads. And yes, it's going to be expensive, but open and transparent government, we've seen what happens when there's a lot of secrecy. We end up with a boondoggle that's costing us in time and energy and frustration for people who need the system in the city. I think that we have to go the whole way and get this judicial inquiry and get things answered once and for all and reinstill confidence in the city government. Yeah.
Mr. Chiarelli was on my program and said, well, if we can always have a vote in the next term of council, because Bob has said he's going to run for mayor. And Brian Guest has a firm called Boxfish, which is a consultancy, and it's done a lot of consulting work on LRT. Millions of dollars, right? So in the email, this was reported by Joanne Chianello this week for the public broadcaster. The email says from Brian Guest in a personal email to Chiarelli, quote, "You know who you are screwing with this support for the judicial inquiry, right? You know who you are screwing with the support for the judicial inquiry, right?"
And I think that Bob is right in his reply. He says, I think that Brian Guest is referring to himself. That's who he is, quote unquote, screwing. And to me, that says, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
What does that
Why
mean?
is somebody who's been knee deep in the file worried about being screwed by a judicial inquiry? So what are the shortcomings in your opinion then? Because, last time around they voted, there was the maneuvering and they voted the mayor's allies to have this Auditor General's report. What are the shortcomings with that?
Well, of course, again, they know that Councillor McKenney is bringing the motion for the judicial inquiry. Of course, it was defeated last time because we were outmaneuvered. I had seconded that motion with Catherine to call for the judicial inquiry. We were totally outmaneuvered, which really isn't a surprise because when the mayor's office wants something, they get it. And, we said Councillor Gower was the one who introduced this, but it was the mayor's office pulling the strings, of course. They didn't want to see it, so it was defeated. We're bringing it back now, but only because it's needed, number one. And number two, everybody's quite aware of what happened. And the mayor's office was, a lot of people were very, very critical of how he handled this. And so maybe this time it will go through. Highly unlikely. He still has the votes. But I think that the councillors who are pressing for answers have got to keep their foot on the pedal.
Right, but if you don't, and we welcome Councillor McKenney to the program this morning. Councillor McKenney, good morning. It's very nice to hear from you again, Councillor. If you know that the vote is going to be defeated this morning anyway, because of the quote-unquote Watson Club, why are you pressing the matter, Councillor McKenney?
You know what? I don't know that it's going to be defeated, Rob. You always have to hope that with and trust that with new information, and we've had a lot of new information over the last 2 weeks, that people will reconsider their position. So, I think that, given the TSB report, the safety board report on what happened with the train, given, our briefing last Friday, and even after that briefing, trains still not running. We'll get half of them tomorrow. The ongoing story about, internal consultants and their concerns about a judicial inquiry. I have to think that all of that combined will serve to change people's minds on council, that in fact we do need, we can go ahead with the Auditor General report, but we do need a judicial inquiry to be able to get to the real root of the issue.
Okay. Councillor Meehan has already weighed in on this email that Mr. Shirelli leaked to the CBC here from Brian Guest, where in it he says, quote, "You know who you are screwing with the support for a judicial inquiry." How do you interpret a line like that in an email, Councillor McKenney? You know who you're screwing with the support for a judicial inquiry, right?
Well, I can tell you that when I read the email, the first thing that came to mind for me was, again, it's even more important that we are seen as a council to be looking out for public interests and not corporate interests here. So, I don't know that it's an admission of wrongdoing, but it certainly leaves that impression. And, as a city residents, I hear from people all the time. They want transparency. They want accountability. They want to rein in corporate influence to the city of Ottawa.
Right.
Those are the things that we hear all the time from, at least I do, from residents. So that, that email would suggest to me that, we do have to be seen to be looking out for the public interest.
Okay, but I'm sorry, Councillor. One of Mr. Guest's concerns is that that this is a ploy, quote, a ploy by the NDP to attack the P3 funding model, and you've been kind of leading that attack. Councillor McKenney, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean,
to destabilize the funding model for big projects like light rail.
Right. So I'm not a fan of P3s. We've seen where they've left us in this city. We certainly, I think if you look at Lansdowne, if you look at the LRT, I think there are better ways of managing large projects. Of course, we will always need, companies in, building systems, but a P3 that actually designs, finances, builds, maintains, we see that risk transfer actually doesn't happen. It is back on us. After $2.2 billion, that risk has been transferred back on to the ridership and to the taxpayers of the city of Ottawa. So, it's never been a secret that I'm not a fan of public-private partnerships.
Do you agree with that, Councillor Meehan, that P3s have not been good for the city? Councillor Meehan?
I won't go so far. I mean, I think that we do, at certain points, we do need P3s. But getting, I guess, to the heart of your question, Rob, when we're pushing for the judicial inquiry for this particular project, this P3, I think that we have some, we have to zero in on certain aspects of this particular P3. Did we have, did the people who procured the project, who procured all the stages, the elements of this project, did they know what they were doing? I want to zero in on the people who were responsible for all the steps along the way. I have no problem when we do a P3, but I want to be really confident that the people who are putting this together have the experience and the know-how and are doing it for the best interests of the city. I'm not so sure that this happened with this particular P3. So that's what I'm interested in. I don't want to throw P3s totally out, but I do share Councillor McKenney's concerns about them. Mr. Guest says in the letter that he wrote to Bob Chiarelli that this is a failure of the P3 in the design, the construction, and the maintenance of this P3, this partnership. Well, that's a total condemnation of what has happened. So why did that happen? And he's saying use the P3 now to go after these partners? Well, my God, what about the people who've been on this train for the past 2 years and now have endured? We are paying a huge personal cost of having this really lousy design, construction, and maintenance. This has been a really costly project. We have to get to the bottom of what happened, who was in charge, who knew what, and when, and why are we not suing people right, left, and center? I don't know. It's so stinky right now. I can't even I can't even really explain how frustrated I am that we've allowed this to go on.
I don't know if I've heard that word used I've heard stronger language than that, but stinky, that's a good word, Councillor.
Well, there's a lot of questions that have been raised.
All right, Councillor McKenney, what do you think of the announcement? 7 train service as soon as Friday. What do you think of that announcement?
Well, obviously, I'm happy to see trains making their way back into service. I can actually see the trains going by where I'm standing, actually my kitchen window, and I've been watching them, empty, of course, going by, and to have at least 50% of our service back by Friday, and fingers crossed that by the end of this month we will have trains, back on the system, operating, but again, I want to just go back to last Friday, Rob, and the TRA experts that were here were quite clear that RTM does not have a culture of caring about this system. They don't have a culture of, good maintenance standards, good safety standards. So while they're here, I believe that with their oversight, we're getting trains back that are operational. I worry about the day that they leave and they will have to go. Again, we are stuck again with RTM. Who we know, essentially doesn't really care about how these trains are maintained.
Anything to add there, Councillor Meehan?
No, they've proved what they're worth time and again over the past 2 years. No, this is not a maintenance company. I think they don't care, and they're only going to care as long as TRA is here. They're trying to cut corners. This is a company that they've been losing money because of the quality of the product. We've been withholding funds, and I think that we're seeing it in the maintenance contract. They're trying to make it up. They just don't have the skilled personnel, the workforce here, and they don't. And ultimately, the worst thing is I don't think they really care. And we have these people for 30 years. God help us.
Okay, the entire city is watching with great interest. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yep. Councillors Meehan and McKenney, council meeting 10 o'clock this morning. You'll watch it on Rogers Television. This is the Rob Snow Show on the City News.
Now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, November 10th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 5 degrees, Smith Falls 6. Here's what's making news this hour. Councillor Carol-Ann Meehan, one of the councillors, pushing for a judicial inquiry into the LRT in Ottawa. She tells the Rob Snow Show an arm's-length review of the entire system needs to be done. She feels with the mayor's pushback of the idea, it's telling. While Meehan says it will be expensive, it's necessary to get answers and bring back confidence into the City Council from citizens of Ottawa. Councillor Catherine McKinney is bringing the motion to call for this judicial inquiry at this morning's council meeting getting underway at 10. They hope new information will change some minds on council and the vote will be in favor of that level of investigation. COVID-19 Science Advisory Council met discussing the increasing COVID cases over the past week. Dr. Doug Manuel says we must get vaccines into children's arms. We're still waiting for Health Canada's approval for the 5 to 11 age group. He also says we must get those unvaccinated their shots and have people with one dose get the second to curb a rising trend, or there could be more restrictions put in place. West of Perth this morning, a passenger in a car died at the scene of a collision with a dump truck. It happened on Highway 17 at Doran Road around 7:20. Now, the driver of that car was also taken to hospital with life-threatening injuries. That person also died in hospital. The 17 is currently closed between Forest Lee and Black Bay Roads. Detours are in place. Line up apparently half an hour in that area. The driver of the dump truck was not injured. City News Time, 9:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
And 1310 AM.
It's time to score your political fix. And joining us this morning, Alex Creston, Senior Consultant, Crestview Strategy. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Jeff Turner is with us as well, Vice President, Blue Sky Strategy Group. Good morning, Jeff.
Hey, Rob. Hey, Alex.
Now, as hot as this conversation is going to be, I don't know if it can manage the heat lamp that was the municipal panel that I just had with a pair of city councilors here in Ottawa, as we are now 52 days without light rail in Ottawa. If you can, Jeff, you're an Ottawa guy, aren't you, Jeff?
I am. What a mess.
Yeah, you're in Ottawa. Yeah. Alex, are you in Ottawa, Alex, or Toronto?
No, I'm not. I'm in the GTA.
In the GTA. Well, can you imagine?
But a guy.
52 days. Imagine 52 days without the TTC, Alex.
Oh,
imagine
man.
52 days. No.
No. There would be a riot.
Yeah. They would have it in for the mayor, I suspect. I don't know if John Tory would survive 52 days without the TTC in Toronto. But let's get into what's happening in federal politics this morning, where it's been all about the troubles in Conservative land. For the last 7 weeks, Erin O'Toole's Conservative Party has been stuck, spinning its wheels on the issue of mandatory vaccines for MPs. The issue peaked in the last week with this Civil Liberties Caucus. David, my producer, calls it the Freedom Caucus. We had this terrible interview by Marilyn Gladu on Question Period, and then the total about-face and apology yesterday by way of a statement from Marilyn Gladu. So, Jeff Turner, what can Erin O'Toole do to get out of this mess?
Oh, boy, that's $1 million question for him. I would like to think that he has some smart people in his circle providing that advice, but he does seem to be stuck, doesn't he? He hasn't found a way out. And right now, the best he's doing, I know we'll talk about it potentially in a little bit, but is the sort of this liberal NDP coalition boogeyman that he's bringing in to save the day. I don't know if that'll get him out of it, especially as his caucus continues to cause problems for it. I think I'd say one thing. I find it really, as we say in parliamentary language, passing strange that this Civil Liberties Caucus is being formed around the same time that the Conservative Party is engaging in a bit of a witch hunt around one of its directors, while its lawyer is demanding through an investigation for a private citizen to turn over all of their personal emails, phone calls, voicemails, communications with party members. here's the, on the one hand, people standing up for civil liberties, at their own description, and on the other hand, the party is trying to chase down one of its own members so that they can squelch any leadership, squabbles within the party. I think it's at odds with each other. And I think folks in my camp also look at this Civil Liberties Caucus and ask, well, how do they feel about a woman's right to choose? How do they feel about LGBT rights? How do they feel about Indigenous rights? I'd be curious about that as well for these folks. I think it's a one-trick pony. Everybody knows it. They've seen them out there, and it's causing immeasurable damage to that brand. My prescription for Erin O'Toole is cut loose the 20% of the crazies. Just cut them loose. Send them over to Max. Get rid of them.
Okay.
Liberal Party's left you a huge center if you want it.
Okay.
Nobody seems to be able to play that. They're just addicted to the sugar of these crazies, quite frankly.
Addicted to the sugar of the crazies. Okay, okay. Just before we get to Alex, this is what it sounded like a little bit yesterday when Erin O'Toole met the media. This is a question from Global News' David Aiken.
Allison Fast, Leslyn Lewis tweeting against pediatric vaccines, Marilyn Gladew's comments, Michael Cram is writing op-eds out in Regina. The team is kind of getting away from the leader on vaccines. Many conservatives might say, when will the leader start to crack some heads in his caucus and remind his caucus that vaccines are safe and that his caucus shouldn't be running around the country saying otherwise?
Vaccines are safe. You're right, David. And all of our MPs are talking about that responsibly. And where people have not,
no, they're not.
Our caucus will be addressing that. We are addressing that. We all have a role to play.
We're addressing that. And then it was shortly thereafter that the statement was released by Marilyn Gladew, so maybe the pressure on the crazies, as Jeff calls them, is starting to be applied. Alex, what can O'Toole do to get out of this mess?
I think we're seeing him do what he's able to do, and what we've seen him. He's favored the carrot approach as opposed to the stick in most policy areas, and specifically on this vaccine issue, certainly what we've seen with his shadow cabinet that he released yesterday, no one who's caused him trouble on the vaccine issue got a position in the shadow cabinet, which you could say, well, those people weren't worth much to him anyways. But I think the fact that Leslyn Lewis isn't there is certainly a sign that he is using the carrot, at least, to send a signal to his caucus that if they're not going to play ball, then he's not going to give them the big jobs. And Marilyn Gladew, also someone who probably would have been in a shadow cabinet before, was not, and quickly issued an apology.
Okay. Everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people that I talk to about this, when I bring it up with the audience, for example, and get phone calls on it, some will suggest, I want him to show some leadership. Like Brian Mulrooney said, basically, in a recent interview. Show some leadership. You have to, if you're the leader, you have to lead. You have to show some leadership and, to justify, maybe perhaps show some of these people the door. But because of the Reform Act, Michael Chong's Reform Act, can he even do that? Is he in a position to even remove any of his members of parliament from his caucus? Or is he hamstrung at this point? People are wanting leadership, but the leader is hamstrung at this point to do anything, Alex.
Well, it certainly has taken some of his power away, but he's in a double-pronged kind of bad scenario. Look, I've worked for party leaders who have lost an election and are facing the wrath of the party membership, and they've got a tight balancing act of keeping their cabinet or keeping their caucus together, as well as staying on the right side of the party membership. So I think what we're seeing here is him playing that kind of tightrope act and trying to stay in a kind of a neutral position as much as he can. Now, I think the people who are on the other side of the issue, those that that folks call crazy, wouldn't think that it's a neutral position at all. So he's kind of in a damned if you do and damned if you don't political position.
All right, but Jeff, is he tied up in knots because the party has tied itself up in knots by embracing this Reform Act stuff?
I don't know if it's because they've embraced the Reform Act. I think the Reform Act definitely ties its hands in terms of, a straight boot out of caucus, which is certainly what might have happened in the pre-Reform Act era, and certainly what could happen in other parties who don't adopt that if those ejections are seen as meritorious and the caucus is on side. I think the leadership then that remains that he can show is to build his to team and to use the sweetener, as Alex said, to bring people along and try to have that peer pressure, for lack of a better word, on those colleagues. And if those colleagues continue to cause trouble for the greater group, then it's incumbent on the greater group under the Reform Act and under the way that they have to proceed to deal with those members. And really ejection should be on the list. I think the challenge, though, is, as you said, Rob, the fault line runs through the party, not just through that particular slice of caucus. And I think the challenge is there's been a lot of emphasis on growing their reach into some of these audiences that now they're captured by and they can't get out of. And I think that's the challenge of the Conservative movement. I saw an interesting piece, recently in the Globe and Mail about these fault lines running through Conservative parties, not just the federal one, but across Canada, and how the leaders across that spectrum are having challenges keeping their tent standing.
Yeah, well, with Doug Ford, and we saw Randy Hillier this week says he's going to start his own party and run candidates in the next election. He wants to run for premier suspenders from Lanark. Doug Ford has he had no qualms about kicking people out. If you're not vaccinated, you're not in my caucus. Why Aaron O'Toole couldn't make the same decisive move as Premier Ford, I don't understand it. But let's move along to the shadow cabinet. You both kind of pivoted there. What stands out for you in some of the critics' roles? Alex?
Yeah, I think what I like to see here is some of the new faces that are in there. I'm really excited to see Melissa Lantzman in Thornhill in the transportation critic role. She's going to have a subway running through her riding with a few stops for her constituents in the near future. So excited to see how those new faces are able to put a slightly different spin on things and as they try to appeal to people in the upcoming election. It'll be important to make sure that those new faces and characters are getting a profile.
Okay. Jeff Turner?
Yeah, I'll agree quickly with Alex as well. I think Melissa Lantzman's a great addition there, as are those new faces. And with Ms. Lantzman in particular, I just point out that she and a couple of others have been quite active in the sort of post-2019 election. Andrew Scheer leadership, struggles to try to drag the party towards some better positions on LGBT issues, and good for her because she's also gotten a reward after the reward of being elected as member of parliament. So I'm happy for her there. The two big names everybody hears about, of course, are Pierre Poilievre going back into finance, and Michelle Rempel-Gardner going into natural resources. For Mr. Poilievre, I think listen, my liberal spin on this is, I think he's the guy who's got the longest, sharpest knife in the leadership battle, and I think this is the reason he's been restored to his former glory is because that knife is rattling a little bit in his belt buckle. I think with Michelle Rempel-Gardner, I think this is a file that's going to require a lot of I'll call it hyperbole, but a lot of noise from the conservative side of the House. And but I also think
I'd use noise. I don't know. I think
well, I'm looking at my clock here, Rob, and turns out we weren't supposed to have vaccines from 8 years from now, according to Michelle Rempel-Gardner, less than a year ago. And it turns out getting vaccines wasn't the problem. It was getting vaccines into arms. And so, I look forward to seeing how she continues to sort of keep that high pitch of attack lines in the natural resources portfolio, because there will be no shortage of fodder for her from where she sits.
Well, I don't know. If you ask provincial premiers and mayors, and I interviewed several times the individual running the vaccine program here for the city of Ottawa, Mr. Demonte, who said repeatedly on this show, we'd be doing great if only we had more vaccines. There was a struggle acquiring vaccines and procuring vaccines and getting vaccines shipped to this country.
There was,
in the early days.
Where that was taken by the critic at the time was telling Canadians not to expect to get a vaccine for up to 8 years, which was just ludicrous, right? Ludicrous.
Well, I think it's the job of the critic to to criticize, and they'll be doing that for just about everything. And I think the other name you mentioned, Pierre Poilievre, is one who has been he's been popular with the Conservative base in his role as the finance critic. He's got sort of both the savvy and the wit that can carry sometimes very dry financial issues. So to put him in the finance critic role, I think just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay, look, we'll stop here. We'll come back. The coalition that wasn't. When we come back, your political fix. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store. A popcorn machine was in there. He didn't want it. I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use the exact words. But anyway, we started, and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself. And to see our brand name, Papa Jack, and Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario, everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec, it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario, it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa, Jack. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. It sometimes people, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses, because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Hey, we're back, part two. Your political fix. With Alex Creston, Senior Consultant, Crestview Strategy, Jeff Turner, Vice President, Blue Sky Strategy. No deal, apparently. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says there is no deal to form any kind of formal Liberal NDP coalition government when the House resumes later this month. Alex, why do you think there's no deal?
I think that if I was Jagmeet Singh, I would be asking for serious roles in a government. I'd be asking for a formal coalition where NDP MPs have cabinet portfolios, where Jagmeet Singh is the deputy prime minister. And if I'm Justin Trudeau, looking at even recent, maybe not that recent anymore, Ontario history at what happened with David Peterson and Bob Rae, it didn't work out very well for the Liberals. So I would say that both both parties are probably both asking for as much as they can get, and probably both being strategically smart in avoiding a deal.
Okay. Why do you think there's no deal, Jeff?
Well, I agree with Alex. A formal coalition is its own thing, and it is different from cooperation in the House or an agreement that priorities or confidence bills will be passed. And that moment's passed. The cabinet's been named. I don't think Jagmeet Singh or NDPers would want to be in the cabinet, quite frankly, because I think it would mean that they would have to walk out of that room like any minister in our system of government and defend the decisions that were made collectively. I don't think they're prepared to do that. I think that they do certainly have a lot of priorities that are shared across not just the Liberal government, but across other parties in the House, including the Bloc of the Greens. And I think that that's going to be good enough to carry this minority for some time on a policy basis. The big question for everybody, I think, is also how committees are run. Committees are the soft underbelly of any minority government. It's where opposition parties make a very dedicated cause of causing trouble for the government and causing the government to be uncomfortable and using increasingly the parliamentary shield on libel and other things to say as many nasty things as they can in a protected environment. So I think trying to get committees functioning in a way that is productive towards the legislative agenda, towards the real huge issues that we are grappling with as a country. I think if the NDP are willing to, and the Bloc for that matter, are willing to work on making the whole Parliament function, not just the high drama confidence votes, then I think that's where agreements may lie. But on the whole coalition notion, I just recently went through an anniversary, and we always have to use this old system of what do you give on a certain anniversary. So I'd like to offer Aaron O'Toole a wonderful crystal gift for the 15th year anniversary of the Liberal NDP coalition boogeyman, and maybe the Freedom Caucus can take that crystal and do their own research onto whether it'll help them with the coalition.
Well, I mean, I think you're onto something there with the committee work, especially in a minority parliament. Why would that's one of the key elements for the opposition is control of committees and the ability to call people to account. Even though the Liberals show that they're masters at filibustering at these committees, but things like maybe there's not much left on but Winnipeg Lab, the questions around that. There are sure to be other reports about COVID-related spending. Why would you surrender the influence of committees? Never seemed to make much sense to me. But nevertheless, these two parties have proven in the last minority government, they get along. I don't think there's a lot of daylight between a Trudeau Liberal and a Singh New Democrat these days. Anyway, I don't think any of us really are affiliated with the team in orange in this particular discussion. But do you see a lot of daylight? I mean, what's the difference, Alex, between a Singh New Democrat and a Trudeau Liberal these days?
There's not an awful lot, and that's by design. The Liberals have made a conscious
the Liberal
decision.
Design, yeah.
Yeah. The Liberals have made a conscious decision to move to the left, and that's certainly, wedged out the NDP in some areas. I think that but that when it comes down to why can't they get along? Why can't they make a coalition? Well, they don't have to be honest. And I think that they're going to want to. The NDP is going to want to be able to show that they can extract as much of their agenda out of the Liberal Party as possible, and that's going to be really easy for them because so much of the agenda overlaps.
Okay. Do you wear orange from time to time, Jeff Turner?
Only when I'm commemorating residential schools and other things.
Sure. Okay. You don't fly the orange flag or anything like that.
My sense on this, Rob, is the difference between the NDP and the Liberals in this context is between aspiration and policy. And I think we saw it really, really in close focus during the election campaign. The ideas are there, the desire is there, where the NDP will play a stronger role, to use that word, on the Liberals will be, trying to get more or higher, whether that's ambitions or targets or funding for pet projects, whatever. But often the NDP, and we saw this in the last election, the policy weight of their platform was next to nil. There was absolutely nothing specific in there that would address, that actually would be a mechanism to address the problems that they identify. And you often heard Jagmeet Singh say in his media appearances or in his stump speech, just hope and we'll get it done. election, we'll just get it done. And I think the difference there is the policies that the Liberals bring actually try to implement those aspirations. And they've been doing that for a number of years, whatever you think of their record. And if you look at that election campaign just passed and the platform that was there, and just take climate change as an example. Great aspirations.
Well, what's the record on climate change? What is the record on climate change?
The 10 most leading climate scientists in Canada endorsing their plan, including former Green Party leaders.
Yeah. But the fact is, Jeff, emissions have gone up every year. Every year they've been in power. 6 years. And their original target, which they're going to miss, the Paris target, was the same as the Harper government's target. I mean, it's really not much of an enviable record when it comes to fighting climate change, Jeff. Come on now. We'll see where we are in the next.
Slowly, but you have to start, and I think they're making just a ton of investment and a ton of, putting a ton of pressure on our economy and our society to try to transform itself into what it needs to be.
What do we have? 90 seconds. 90 seconds. Okay. The Air Canada stuff. I really want to get into this. Why should I care if the Air Canada CEO speaks French? Does it matter? Is it the government's business that the Air Canada CEO speaks French? Alex?
This is an issue that makes sense for all the parties to pander in Quebec. But frankly, for folks in English Canada, so it is a serious issue for francophones in Quebec. I don't deny them that, but for people in English Canada, they probably don't care if the CEO of Air Canada even speaks English, as long as they get their plane picks them up when it's supposed to and takes them where it's supposed to go.
Yeah. I wish I'd just get a better snack than Sun Chips. I don't like Sun Chips. Is it the government's business, Jeff, if the CEO of Air Canada speaks French, or is it to Alex's point, is this just pandering? Is it pandering, political pandering?
I'll agree with Alex. It's the government's business. Anything's the government's business when it's high enough in the news cycle, right? We always bring it to them. I mean, Air Canada has a long history, first as a nationalized company that did have an official bilingual mandate. It also has a long cultural history where the bosses were English and the workers were French. And I think what happened here is many decades later from that time, here's the CEO stepping in. And I think for folks like Alex and I in our business as communications advisors and professionals, this is a case study of.
This program is brought to you by Ignite.